Hi, I'm Peter Leopold, a curator here at the National Museum of American History, and I'd like to show you some of the artifacts from our collection that will give you a little bit of insight into the Dust Bowl era. Dust Bowl farmers um, really lived in a difficult time in the 30s. They refer to it as the Dirty 30s. And for agriculture, it was a very difficult time even before the weather turned bad. That the agriculture had really boomed during World War I. The prices were up. People expanded considerably, bought equipment, bought land. And then with the 20s, after World War I, the commodity prices for things like flour and corn really dropped tremendously. The demand went down. And as the demand went down, the weather turned bad. And so there was a real alignment of serious problems. And to compound it even more, there was a lot of technological change that was going on in agriculture. And all these things collided to create an extraordinarily difficult time for farmers in one part of the nation. And the Dust Bowl was certainly a catastrophe of major ecological means, but it was also a real problem in terms of finance, even of land use. One of the first things to understand about agriculture in the 30s was that there was fundamental change going on. Mechanized plows that could be pulled by horses came along, and by the mid 19th century, a lot of equipment was being invented. Here we have a mower. This is invented. This is a patent model invented by a fellow named Eichmeyer, and it was an innovation. All patent models really are small innovations in mowing, probably a change in the type of cutter teeth. But mowers like this meant that farmers could be more productive. And by the 20s, people were using horse-drawn sulkies. A sulky is a plow that you get to ride on top of. You can see there's a little seat here. The horse would be harnessed up in the front. And as the farmer went through the field, the soil would be turned over. The fields would be, they would be in the fields a lot, not only plowing initially, but as the crop was growing, they would have to cultivate in order to keep the weeds down. So instead of using the hoe for cultivation, you could use cultivators, machinery, to keep the weeds down. But all of this meant turning the soil over and over, exposing the soil to the environment. So the tractor that we all think is fundamental to agriculture really started to burst on the scene in the teens. Earlier, there had been some big steam-powered tractors. This is actually a toy tractor, probably was made in the 20s or 30s. It's typical of the period. And these were lightweight little tractors, 5 to 10 horsepower, and capable of doing lightweight work and relatively inexpensive so that farmers could afford them. So here we have a piece of trade literature from the Angel plow. Trade literature is a wonderful historic document for us to look at, to understand the thinking behind farming at the time period. These are the advertisements that are produced. Trade literature is still produced today for things that you might want to buy. This piece was produced in the 20s, and reading from it is really fascinating. Here's the Angel plow being pulled by a tractor, very similar to the toy tractor that I have here. Multi-bottom plow, so instead of a single share, it's actually got many different discs here being pulled through. And in the advertisement it says, "Increase your yield. By an entirely new principle of design, Mr. Angel has built a disc plow that thoroughly pulverizes and turns the soil for a depth of 3 to 6 inches, killing all weeds and volunteer weed, but still leaving enough of the stubble on the top of the ground to serve as a mulch to hold the moisture and prevent the soil from blowing." So you can see in the 20s, that farmers were thinking about some of the problems. They knew that the wind could blow the soil, and they were looking for technological fixes. Um, but the thought of not farming the land certainly wasn't likely because farmers are optimistic. They assume the rains will come and they'll be able to grow bumper crops. But the switch to mechanized equipment, tractors, sulky plows, moving away from the sickle to a mower, all of this meant that farming becomes capital intensive. That 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 agriculture is about spending more money. You spend more money, you have more equipment, you produce more goods, and it all works out well as long as it works out well. If the weather is good, if pests stay away and you have a good crop, everything is fine and you can maintain the loans that you've taken out to buy the equipment. But as you become more capital intensive and almost everybody had debt to support the equipment, it means that you're much more at risk. And if something goes bad, if the market falls apart, if a drought comes along, then the results will be disastrous much faster because you have to pay the bank, and the pressure to produce more is great. So there's a bit of a cycle that as you start to use more equipment, that it becomes an urge to plant more and turn up more land. And in agriculture, how much land you should actually plant is always a big issue. In the United States, from its inception up until probably about 1920, the axiom always had been extensive rather than intensive. And by this means that the United States is blessed by a lot of arable land and rich areas that we can grow a lot of crops. And farmers didn't have to be terribly productive because they could just extend into new areas and plant more and more areas. The number of acres under till was at its height in the mid-20s. Today, farming has become intensive. So there's been a change. The number of acres that are being cultivated in the United States today is actually less than it was in the 1920s, yet production is considerably higher. So farming is much more intensive. It means that farmers are squeezing much more out of the same pieces of ground that they had before. Things don't always work out as expected, that sometimes there are consequences that you would never think would occur. In the Dust Bowl, there was a lot of unintended consequence of agricultural practice. That farmers did things that they thought would make them more productive, but in fact were horrific to the land. They didn't do it because they were mean people. They did it because they didn't think about it. And these kinds of surprises are things that are humbling for us all and always good to think about as we look at new inventions and new solutions.